Ho, ho, ho! Merry Christmas! I'm the Azure NetApp Files Santa, or ANF Santa for short, but you can just call me by my Starbucks coffee name, Tom. Of course, other coffee vendors are available. Now, although Christmas was a couple of days ago, I've got a few more gifts to help you kickstart the new year. It's been an incredibly busy Christmas, so Rudolph and I are heading off on our holidays, but don't you worry, one of my trusty ANF elves is here to show you how to start the new year with new savings and mastering Azure NetApp Files cost optimization. Happy New Year, everyone. This year, the Festive Tech Calendar team is proud to support the Beats and Cancer charity. Below is a link to the team's Just Giving page. If you're able, please consider donating to this very worthy cause. Your support can make a real difference. Hello and welcome to this session on mastering Azure NetApp Files cost optimization. Coming up, we'll be exploring some methods that you can use to help optimize ANF for both performance and price, as well as some of the new features that Microsoft have introduced this year to again help you optimize Azure NetApp Files to meet performance as well as cost optimization. Now, let's just briefly remind ourselves what Azure NetApp Files is. Okay, let's have a brief overview of the Azure NetApp Files service. Azure NetApp Files delivers volume as a service with the widest choice of file protocols, NFS, SMB, and indeed dual protocol volumes. And that is a USP within the Azure ecosystem. Azure NetApp Files is the only file storage to offer dual protocol volumes. It brings on-premises bare metal performance that's delivered using 3 service levels, standard, premium, and ultra. And indeed, this year, Microsoft introduced an additional capability of cool access tiering, the ability to tier cold data out of the Azure NetApp Files volumes and into cool access storage. It brings advanced enterprise class data management capabilities, all the goodness of NetApp's ONTAP system that brings snapshots, clones, replication, and backup. And it's delivered using an Azure consistent experience. It's really important to point out that this is a Microsoft first-party Azure native service, delivered, supported, and built by Microsoft. This is not an Azure Marketplace offering. This is a first-party Azure native solution. The workloads that Azure NetApp Files fits really well with, there are many, but here is an example of 6 key workloads that the Azure NetApp Files service goes a long way to adding value to. SAP, a very highly strung solution, high performance, low latency requirements. High performance compute, where the ability to scale to petabyte scale on demand is super important, and Azure NetApp Files volumes can be scaled up to 2 petabytes. VDI, or in this case Azure Virtual Desktop, delivering user profiles, improved login times, consistent user experience, very simple integration with Active Directory, and the ability to address massive open file handles is really important. And Azure NetApp Files goes a long way to adding value to the Azure Virtual Desktop workload. The databases such as SQL and Oracle, having the ability to decouple the storage from the virtual machines, which means customers can most likely deploy smaller virtual machines with less vCPU. And in Azure, the licensing for Oracle and SQL can be tied to those vCPUs, so less vCPU, less licensing. An Azure VMware solution, similar to the databases, having the ability to decouple the storage from the AVS nodes and expand the storage independently using Azure NetApp Files NFS data stores, can massively help to drive down the node count. With AVS, it's essentially a HCI solution. If you need more of anything, you need more boxes. So customers that are storage constrained could be over-provisioning those AVS nodes to meet the storage requirements. But by offloading the data stores onto Azure NetApp Files, customers could look to deploy a much smaller node count and therefore massively help to drive down expenditure. And the one at the bottom, enterprise network attached storage, unstructured user data, departmental shares, home folders. With this year's introduction of cool access tier, this particular workload is becoming more and more of interest to customers. Being able to consume Azure NetApp Files at a much cheaper price point by tiering data out of the volumes and into cool access is enabling customers to save money, but still be able to benefit from all that enterprise-grade data management capability, snapshots, cloning, backup, and replication that the Azure NetApp File service offers. Okay, now that we've had a recap on what Azure NetApp Files is, we're going to look at two methods that you can implement to help you drive down costs. The first one is dynamic volume shaping, and the second one is dynamic service level change. Let's have a look. Let's have a look at dynamic volume shaping. Now, Azure NetApp Files is an extremely flexible and scalable service, and these are some of the benefits of the service where you can flex volumes for capacity or throughput on demand. So as an example, I currently have a volume of 50 gig in size. I need more capacity, so I simply come here, click on resize, change my 50 gig to say, let's scale it up to 1 terabyte. Click OK. And within a few seconds, my 50 gig volume has been grown to now be 1 terabyte in size. So that's one way to scale the volume. I could also scale it back down again. For instance, if I no longer needed that capacity, I could shrink that volume down to whichever level I needed without penalty. Now, with dynamic volume shaping as well, what we can also do is leverage the capacity pool and the throughput within the capacity pool to give a volume more throughput. Now, if I just go to my capacity pools here, as you'll see, I currently have a capacity pool of 4 terabytes in size. Now, if I needed more throughput, not necessarily capacity, but throughput, I can then go and resize this capacity pool and change it, for instance, from 4 to 8 terabytes, so doubling it in size. That capacity pool had 64 mega throughput. Now I've doubled that capacity. It now has 128 mega throughput available for me to assign to volumes within that capacity pool. Now if I go back to my volume, which currently has 16 mega throughput assigned to it. It's 1 terabyte in size, but it has 16 mega throughput assigned to it. Now, an example of where you could really benefit this is, say, with Azure Virtual Desktop, where you have, in the morning, login storms. Users coming in, everybody's trying to log in the platform. There's a bit more demand on the platform, and that demand will probably tail off, say, I don't know, mid-morning, and then it will probably stabilize throughout the working day, and there might be a bit of a peak at the end, but essentially you need more throughput at that point in time. So what you can do is to then add additional throughput to that volume to meet the demand as and when it's needed. And to do that, I'll simply come up here, click on Change Throughput. 16 megabytes of throughput currently assigned. Now, let's say I need a bit more. Let's up that now to 64. So I've now granted that volume the ability to use 64 megabytes of throughput. As simple as that. Now, say after the login storm has tailed off, we're back to a more steady state of working. I can then simply come back in, change my throughput, and reduce it back down to the original 16 meg. It's as simple as that. And it's important to point out that because Azure NetApp Files is a Microsoft first-party resource managed service, this can also be done programmatically using toolsets such as ARM templates, Azure Bicep, or indeed Terraform. Essentially, performance optimization in the cloud has a natural byproduct of cost optimization. So if you can scale your services to meet the performance requirements as and when they're needed, and then shrink that down when you don't, ultimately, that is going to go a long way to helping you save money. So that is dynamic volume shaping. Next, we're going to have a look at dynamic service level change. dynamic service level change gives you the ability to take a volume operating at a service level, say standard, and move that to a higher service level, premium or ultra. The great thing about this is that is a non-disruptive change, so that volume can be moved between service levels. There is one caveat to be aware of. There is a cooling off period of 24 hours before you can then move that volume to a lower service level. So let's have a look at how to do dynamic service level change. Now here I have a capacity pool of 4 terabytes at the standard service level. Now, for instance, if I had a workload, say payroll, right? You know when the payroll is going to run, usually say once a month, you know when that's going to happen. But for the rest of the working month, the workload it's there, it ticks over, but it doesn't need that amount of performance. But you know, for instance, that workload at its peak requires, I don't know, over 200 megawatts of throughput. But there's no point having it running at that level for the whole of the month if it's only required, for instance, say for 24 hours. So with dynamic service level change, you can move that volume to, say, a higher service level, wait for the workload demand to tail off, and then once that's completed, after 24 hours, you can then move the volume back to a lower service level, therefore saving money. So let's have a look at that. Now my volume is here, and it's currently operating at the standard service level. It's got 16 mega throughput assigned to it. Now, to enable dynamic service level change, I'll simply click here and then select change pool. I select the pool I want to move the volume into, in this case, this premium pool, and then I click OK. Now that volume is being moved non-disruptively from that standard service level capacity pool into the premium level capacity pool. In a matter of seconds, it's done. Now what I can do is I can come to this volume and then I can say change its throughput. Now, because it's in that 4 terabyte premium capacity pool, 64 meg per terabyte is available, 4 times 64, that's 256 meg. So my workload, I know, for this peak period requires 200 mega throughput. So I'm going to give it 200 mega throughput. Click OK. And then within a few seconds, I've scaled my volume from running at 16 mega throughput all the way up to 200 mega throughput. It's as simple as that. My workload comes, I can meet the throughput performance demands during its peak time. Once that's then tailed off, I can then, after 24 hours, take that volume and move it back down to the standard service level. This is another way to help you massively save cost with Azure NetApp Files by really leveraging the flexibility and scalability of this service. So 2 basic methods that we've just covered: dynamic volume shaping, the ability to shape a volume to meet demand as and when you need it within the same service level, and dynamic service level change, the ability to lift a volume from a lower service tier to a higher service tier to then leverage more throughput and more capability for a period of time and then move it back once that demand has dropped off. Next up, we're going to look at 2 new features that Microsoft have introduced this year: cool access tiering and reserve capacity. Let's have a look. Now, let's have a look at 2 new features that Microsoft have introduced for Azure NetApp Files this year. The first one, cool access or data tiering. Essentially, this feature enables you to tier data off of the Azure NetApp Files volume into cool access based on lifecycle, and savings can be up to 65%. The other feature is Azure NetApp Files reserve capacity. This can be reserved like Azure reservations for 1 or 3 years, and the savings with reserve capacity can be up to 34%. So Azure NetApp Files Cool Access, essentially this transparently tiers data, blocks of data that are cold to Azure Storage. This is based on lifecycle. The lifecycle can be set between 2 to 183 days. But ultimately, this is a great feature to enable you to drive down the cost of storage but still maintain all the enterprise-grade data management capabilities that Azure NetApp Files has. Now, the product team have quite handily put together a savings estimator, which is available online for you to push and pull around to find out whether or not you could benefit from using Cool Access and what the savings might look like. So let's have a quick look at that calculator. So this is the calculator. What I've got here of inputs of 500 terabytes in the UK South region, the standard service level. Now you can choose the percentage of your data that you deem to be cool. Realistically, I would suggest most people's data, 80% plus, hasn't been touched for a substantial period of time. But essentially, you can move this slider around to choose how much of your data. So let's set this to say 85%. So I know 85% of my data is cool. After how many days should the data be considered cool and therefore moved? So you can say, well, any data that hasn't been touched for a period of time. Now, let's set that to, say, 45 days. So any data, once it reaches the age of 45 days, will be moved into Cool Access tier. Now, these are the blocks of data, so they're very efficient. These aren't the whole files, these are the blocks that are moved. And also, at some point, you'd imagine some of this data might be records. So what you can also do is say, well, what percentage of my data over a working month do I think might be record? So this is set at 10%. Let's leave it at that. Now, what it's showing me here is, for the first year, 2 years and 3 years, the estimated annual savings. But ultimately, as you can see down the bottom, it's predicting my estimated savings by leveraging Azure NetApp Files Cool Access is going to be in the region of, say, 43%. So that is quite a considerable saving over the standard operating cost. The great thing about this, it's transparent to the end users, the application. So the application end user still sees the data, the metadata still lives in the volume, but the blocks of data reside at the Cool Access layer, thus helping to save you a huge amount of money. Now let's have a look at Azure NetApp Files Reserve Capacity. So Azure NetApp Files Reserve Capacity is essentially like Azure Reservations, reserved instances, where you can purchase reserve capacity for Azure NetApp Files in 100 terabyte or 1 petabyte chunks for either 1 or 3 years. The table down the bottom left gives you the idea of the percentage of savings. The great thing about these reservations is they can be shared across subscriptions within the same region. So as an example, if I had multiple subscriptions in, say, UK South, I can share that reservation across all the subscriptions. So I might have 50 terabytes in one, 30 terabytes in another, 20 terabytes in another subscription. But those can be shared, so you can really help to drive down those costs. The purchase of reservations is quite simple. Within the Azure portal, you look for reservations, you click on Purchase Now, you choose the product SKU that you wish to purchase, for instance 100 terabytes of premium in East US, and then you apply that. So that reservation is then applied against your subscription. Very simple to do, but can introduce considerable cost savings. Now, let's have a look at reserve capacity and Cool Access. So the great thing about this is using these together can go even further to help you drive down your storage consumption charges. The important thing to note here, though, is the reserve capacity you purchase only covers the storage in the Azure NetApp Files volume. So it only covers the storage, let's say, which is at the hot level. It doesn't cover the storage that lands, or the data that lands within the Cool Access tier itself. But ultimately, if you look to combine these together, in this example, you'll see 500 terabytes of capacity in the East US region. List prices cost approximately $75,000. So a current state for 1 year of consumption is just over $900,000 based on the list price. If you then look at using reserve capacity based on those discounts, as you can see, that's bringing it down considerably to just over $740,000. Or if you look to utilize Cool Access only, based on the retrieval of data at 5% and the cool data being at 60%, then that's bringing the price down to around about $586,000. However, if you then look to combine both Azure NetApp Files cool access and reserve capacity, as you'll see at the bottom here, percentage of the savings is around about 40%, which is bringing your overall annual consumption charge down to $521,250. So as you can see, that's a considerable saving. But by utilising both features together, it can massively help to drive down the expenditure for Azure NetApp Files. And there you have it, an in-depth look at how to master cost optimization with Azure NetApp Files. Now let's recap on what we've covered today. Dynamic volume shaping. By adjusting volume sizes on the fly, you can ensure you're only paying for the storage you actually need without any waste. Dynamic service level change. Seamlessly switch between service levels based on your workload demands, optimizing performance without unnecessary costs. Cool access tiering, a new feature introduced in 2024. Cool access tiering allows you to store less frequently accessed data at a lower cost, making your storage solution even more economical. Then there was reserve capacity. By committing to a certain amount of capacity for a term of either 1 or 3 years, you can take advantage of a significant cost saving, making your budget stretch even further. With all these features at your disposal, Azure NetApp Files not only delivers enterprise-grade data management capabilities, but it also helps you save money in the process. So, why wouldn't you want to use Azure NetApp Files? Optimize your costs and leverage the full power of a world-class storage solution. It's a win-win. Thank you for joining me, and happy optimizing.